Hello. We have come to the end of the location of Atlantis and its possible configurations with an average accuracy of 10% to 20%. In this last video we will see the impact of an earthquake generating a tidal wave. We will end with a synthesis of our theory, specifying general considerations. Let's start with the earthquake and the tidal wave. This graph by Professor Diaz-Montezano shows the results of the turbidity analyses carried out in the coastal region subject to tidal waves. Indeed, the Andalusian zone is one of the most important seismic zones in Europe. Earthquakes are frequent and sometimes devastating, like the one that destroyed part of Lisbon in 1755 in E3. We forgot the damage caused in Cadiz and the decline of its port at that time, without forgetting the tens of thousands of deaths from Portugal to Morocco. To assess the impact of a tidal wave we will take that of -218 BC in E5, which is the oldest known in the texts, and the best documented by scientists. It is of medium amplitude and of short-term effect compared to that around -3000 before Jesus Christ in E6. Let's study it. You can see the tidal wave sheet following studies by the Geological and Mining Institute of Spain. Its magnitude is 8, which makes it one of the most destructive. Its penetration into the land is estimated from 12 kilometers to 17 kilometers for a height of 5 meters. We will keep the minimum. Its epicenter is estimated at this location. It is a very frequent site of the main earthquakes in Western Europe because it is at the crossroads of the African and Iberian plates. The impact of a 12 kilometers penetration of a tidal wave on each exposed coast of the island is simulated here. Let us compare with this Egyptian map of the 12th dynasty, which reminds us of the ones we have studied previously and is more schematic. It is taken from Professor Diaz-Montezano's book, which I remind you of, at place Atlantis facing the Strait of Gibraltar. This card from the sarcophagus of the chief of physicians Guat dates from the years -2000 to -1750 BC. There is an area painted in blue representing the part of the flooded island in the northwest at the bottom left. It touches the divine boat of the city temple, indicating the flood. Atlantis could therefore already have been destroyed before -1750 BC. Note that the area of the simulated flood on the coast of the island is very similar. This further increases the likelihood of the location matching maps and the city area. The possibility of a destructive tidal wave is well confirmed in this area. To synthesize these videos, we must remember that this research lasted about 20 years. Attendance has not been constant as advances and discouragement have taken place. I still pay tribute to all those who contributed openly and in good faith to the search for Atlantis and to my work. Without them it would have been much more complicated and might not have succeeded. Thanks again to the work of Professor Diaz-Montezano, who, without having found it, has made the most progress on the subject in recent years. He is also one of the main players in the renewed interest in Atlantis in recent years. Unfortunately, his analysis or his connection to other popular theories lacked insight. I still have a special respect for him. Professor Freund also marked the latest research in the Park of Dinana much further north of our location. Passionate amateurs like Hefke have come closer with the assimilation of the Phoenician counter of Dona Blanca with Atlantis. This site in the southeast of the island is for me the Tartessian port of load shedding present on the engraving of Campanario reused by the Carthaginian Punics. The presence of Tartessian and Punic artifacts at this location makes the link, but the seaside site is too small and narrow to make it a capital of almost 5 kilometers. In addition, it hardly corresponds to the descriptions of Plato, and the presence of the rings of land and sea under the silt of the Guadalide is hypothetical. You will tell me almost as much as we do until the excavations have found nothing. As such, let us recall the elements that guided us throughout this research. Let us now summarize our work. We calculated the place of Tartessos on the indications of Strabo, restored the correct location of the columns of the Temple of Hercules, recalled the different theories present all around, documented redraws all the ancient coasts that drew the ancient island of Atlantis, rediscovered the ancient configuration of the mouths and the Guadalquivir and Guadalete rivers. From there we produced a simulation of the map of the ancient island, where we indicated the reliefs, canals, rivers, and current streams with the appropriate contour lines. We have reconstructed the profiles of the ancient canals which are still present today for the most part, but with sections that are sometimes overlooked towards coastal outlets in the east. We then sifted through the elements of Plato describing the precise location of Atlantis, these ports, these enclosures, these towers, water ditches, trenches, and oblique canals, earth rings, entrance to the city. Also proposed the location of the stone quarries of the city. We have observed the hills of low elevations around a plain facing south. We have always produced the measurements and comparison, if they were available. We also linked and made a precise comparison of the country of the gods to the west for the ancient Egyptians. This island was considered paradise for them. We have proposed an etymology of the term Tartessos as the land of the gods. As such, we agree with the analysis of the signage and symbolism of these cards by Professor Diaz Montezano in his books. We have also seen that the island and the city and their configurations correspond to the rock carvings of Campanario or the ravine of the Toril in Spain provided by Professor Diaz Montezano. These elements have been replaced in the current context of geography both in layout and in dimension by determining the elements of relevance. The probability of a tidal wave and its impact on the site has even been compared with Egyptian maps. We have left to the interpretation of the ground the smallest possible place reserved simply for the combinations of the positions of the Temple of Poseidon and the Palace of Atlas. Here is a reminder of the main photos and illustrations with our ultimate point of view. Finally, the interpretation of texts is always questionable as much by the translation or the rhetoric of the authors as by the semantics and syntax of the expression. Its interpretations are always the pretext for diverging views. And it must be said that over time and versions, the text of Plato is not the most clear and constructed that I could read. There are many digressions and he seems to be delivering a story that zooms in and out according to his memory. He happily passes from a description of the Atlantis region to the city Atlantis, and vice versa. It describes minor and general elements that may concern the whole of Andalusia or the single island. Sharing is necessarily structuring, but by validating each of the different solutions we end up finding the one that does not lead to an impasse with integrity. This is one of the issues that generated as many theories, each more original than the last. Despite everything, putting the columns of Hercules in Greece, Denmark, or Arabia, or even in Bermuda is not very serious. I declare with force and conviction that I have tried to put all the rigor, logic, and completeness into the interpretation of the texts. It is enough to sift through the other theories to immediately see the gross subjective drifts. Some theories are on the side of such subjectivity that they either accept only favorable arguments or shamelessly twist them. Another term synonymous with our work after objectivity and exhaustiveness is coherence. In Plato's text, the most difficult thing is to know when he is talking about the region of Atlantis and when it only concerns the city of Atlantis, because the term is unique in his text. He speaks only of Atlantis, Nessos, generic term which identifies marshes, an island, a promontory, an Atlantean peninsula. It is also one of the causes of the proliferation of theories. A final point to mention is the measurement of distances. I chose the most probable equivalents of Plato's measures, namely the Athenian measures which lasted late until the Roman period of Pliny. It is also a point of possible conflict between researchers depending on the interests of each other. My stallion is that in force at the time of Solon and Plato which are Athenians. The Athenian measurements are fairly average. There are rare slightly higher measures, but there are also lower measures including the Egyptians which are at the origin of the texts of Plato. But Plato does not mention if a translation with Egyptian measures has already been done, like that done with the names of people. The Egyptian stadium is a little shorter at 156 meters, or minus 15%. When you see our results, this can accentuate the adequacy between our theory and the field measurements, which are often between 10% and 20%. But I preferred not to take it into account so as not to get into more controversy. That is to say, the precautions taken. Finally, the only thing that we can concede is our interpretation of the name Tartessos and Atalaya. Likewise, the positioning of the temple of Poseidon and the palace of Atlas may be slightly offset or different. But in the absence of a precise survey, and as complete as my work, I remain confident a few tens of meters. There is one last thing to do. Engage in excavations. This will not be easy given the legal texts in force in Spain and the location on fertile land sometimes belonging to the domains of large Spanish landowners. One thing is more than likely. Atlantis is located at the Atalaya. One of the last mythical cities is within our reach as Troy before. If I was as rich as Schliemann, I will start the excavations tomorrow. It is localized, but it must still be resuscitated. I hope to see him during my lifetime. A trip to the site, a book or a detailed documentary would be interesting to produce. I listen to criticisms, questions or proposals. For the convinced, support me and make our theory known. The others, in light of the information provided, I am the first sorry for your skepticism. Here it was, the last video. Now, after my daughter Marie, this is the thing that interests me the most. The work of a lifetime in connection with history, as an upset passion. Thank you one last time for your attention.